Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every decision you've made for the last 10 years wasn't yours. The job you work, the way you dress, the things you say, even the people you surround yourself with. What if all of it was shaped not by your own inner compass, but by an unending need to be liked, accepted, and validated by others? What if your whole life was actually a performance, and the actor, you, had forgotten the script was never yours to begin with? That's the moment where everything shatters. And in that silence you hear it, your real voice, buried beneath layers of people-pleasing.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You see, people-pleasing is not about kindness. It masquerades as compassion, humility, and selflessness, but underneath it is fear, raw, primal fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. And yet, in trying to avoid rejection, we reject ourselves first. We silence the parts of us that don't fit the mold, that might upset someone, that challenge the status quo. And in doing so, we become ghosts in our own lives, present, but not alive. The first massive reason people-pleasing destroys you is this: it disconnects you from your truth. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're teaching your nervous system that your needs don't matter. Every time you smile to avoid conflict, you're telling your soul that peace is more important than authenticity. And it adds up. Over time, you can no longer distinguish between what you want and what others want from you. You become a mirror, reflecting everyone else, but never seeing your own reflection. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." Let that sink in. Not being who you are. Not losing a job, not failing a relationship, not being broke, but abandoning your essence. That's despair. And the tragedy is, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We call it being nice, being polite, being a team player. But deep down, there's a quiet scream. What about me? Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you made a decision that was completely, unapologetically yours? Not calculated for how it would be perceived. Not softened to avoid judgment. Not filtered through someone else's comfort. Just pure, instinctive, soul-level yes or no. If you can't remember, you're not alone. But that's the danger. The more you forget yourself, the harder it becomes to return. The second reason people-pleasing destroys you is because it creates a false identity and then traps you inside it. You become the nice guy, the good girl, the go-to helper, the peacemaker. And once you've been cast in that role, you're terrified to break character. You fear that if you stop pleasing, you'll lose love. But let's be honest, if someone only loves the version of you that's convenient for them, do they really love you? Or do they love the service you provide? You can't build real intimacy on a lie. And people-pleasing is, at its core, a lie. It's emotional manipulation dressed up as virtue. You're not being generous, you're trading pieces of yourself for crumbs of affection. And the cost is staggering. You lose your voice, your strength, your boundaries. You become resentful, exhausted, and hollow. And worst of all, you start to believe that this is just who you are. But it's not. It's who you became to survive. Maybe as a child, you learned that being good kept you safe, that staying quiet kept the peace, That meeting everyone else's needs earned you love, and maybe it worked back then. But now, it's killing you. What once protected you is now your prison. And the key isn't in anyone else's hand, it's in yours. There's a moment in every people-pleaser's life where the weight becomes unbearable. You say yes to one more favor, one more meeting, one more emotional dumping session, and something inside you breaks. You feel it in your stomach, in your chest, sometimes even in your dreams. You start fantasizing about disappearing, moving to a cabin in the woods, starting over. But you don't need to vanish. You need to return to yourself. The third reason this destroys you is because it completely erodes your boundaries. And without boundaries, there's no self. You become a sponge, absorbing everyone else's emotions, problems, expectations. You say yes when you're exhausted. You listen when you're depleted. You give when you're empty. And then you wonder why you feel used, bitter, and unseen. It's because you've trained people to believe your needs don't exist. But here's the truth: boundaries are not walls. They're doors. They tell others how to enter your life with respect. And when you start setting them, people will resist. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something new. You're disrupting the contract they made with the old version of you, the version who never said no. And some of them will leave. Let them. Because those who stay, they're the ones who love the real you. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." You play subject with you. How many people are you shaping your life around who don't even know you? Who only see the version of you that performs, agrees, appeases? You're letting strangers hold the pen to your life story. It's time to take it back. Let me ask you something powerful. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to please everyone? Picture it. Would you quit your job? Would you leave that relationship? Would you finally speak your truth? Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in clarity, meaning that life is possible. But it requires a death, the death of the people pleaser. And that is no small thing. It's terrifying. It feels like betrayal, but it's actually the beginning of loyalty to yourself. The fourth reason people-pleasing is so destructive is because it makes you invisible. Not literally, but existentially. People don't see you, they see a function, a role, a servant. And the more you comply, the more they forget there's a human being behind the yes. You become easy to take for granted. And eventually you start taking yourself for granted. You stop dreaming. You stop asking for more. You tell yourself, this is enough, even when your soul is starving. But you were not born to be invisible. You were born to matter, to take up space, to have needs, desires, preferences, and not just silently, but out loud, with your chest, with your voice, with your presence. The world doesn't need more agreeable ghosts. It needs you, fully expressed, fully alive, fully honest. The final and perhaps most dangerous reason is this: people-pleasing destroys your potential. Because when you spend your energy managing other people's emotions, you have nothing left for your own growth. You miss opportunities because you're afraid of upsetting someone. You stay small because you don't want to outshine others. You dilute your passion to keep the peace. And in doing so, you rob the world of your greatness. Think of every genius, every innovator, every world changer you admire. Do you think they got there by being agreeable? By staying quiet? By never rocking the boat? No. They got there by being disruptive, by being true, and yes, by risking rejection. But they knew that their mission was bigger than their fear. So is yours. Don't let the fear of disappointing others become the reason you disappoint yourself. You will never reach your highest self by trying to be everyone's favorite. Your light will make some people squint. Your truth will make some people uncomfortable. But that's not your problem. That's their growth opportunity. Your only job is to be you radically, unapologetically, and consistently. Let's continue the journey. We've started to peel back the layers of people-pleasing, exposing it for what it really is, not kindness, not virtue, but an identity built on fear. And now we go deeper, because beneath the surface lies a more dangerous truth. People-pleasing doesn't just steal your voice, it rewires your entire life around avoidance. Avoidance of conflict, of rejection, of being misunderstood. But what you avoid, you become controlled by. And in that avoidance, you trade freedom for safety. But safety at the cost of self is not safety at all. It's a slow spiritual suffocation. Imagine a life where every decision is filtered through one question: will they still like me if I do this? That question becomes a compass, but it leads you in circles. You think you're making progress, but you're just orbiting your own potential. You become a master at intuiting others' needs, predicting their reactions, shaping yourself to meet their expectations. But all the while, you're abandoning your own path. You're not living forward. You're living around others. Here's the paradox. In trying so hard to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to yourself. You erase yourself from your own story. And the narrative that replaces you isn't even yours. It's a mosaic of other people's beliefs, assumptions, and desires. That's why people-pleasing is so insidious. It doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like duty. It feels like being good. But goodness without authenticity is just performance. And performance without purpose always leads to burnout. We must confront this. People-pleasing is a form of self-betrayal so subtle, so socially rewarded, that we don't even recognize it for what it is. But your body knows. Your nervous system knows. That tightness in your chest when you agree to something you hate. That pit in your stomach when you say yes out of guilt. That exhaustion you feel after being on for everyone but yourself. Those are not random. They are alarms, and you've been trained to silence them. Let's be honest, most of us learned people-pleasing in childhood. We were taught, directly or indirectly, that love is conditional. That we are more lovable when we're quiet, helpful, agreeable. And so we became experts at reading emotional weather patterns. We learned how to soothe, stabilize, and please the adults around us. But what we didn't learn was how to listen to ourselves. Its skill was never modeled. So we created a survival strategy. And now, as adults, we're still running it, but it's killing who we're meant to be. The philosopher Alan Watts said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." But that's what happens when your identity is based on others' approval. You keep chasing a reflection, adjusting yourself to be palatable, acceptable, lovable, only to wake up one day and realize you don't actually know who you are. Not really. You know who you are to others. But who are you to yourself? This is where the real work begins. We have to unlearn the addiction to approval, because that's what it becomes, an addiction. You get a hit of validation when someone is pleased. You feel safe, secure, seen, but then it wears off, and you need another hit, and another. Until you're stuck in a cycle where your self-worth is entirely dependent on external feedback. That's not love. That's dependency. Think about this. When you spend your life people-pleasing, you're not just faking your personality, you're faking your destiny. You never give yourself the space to find out what you actually want. You're too busy reacting to everyone else. And that's the fourth layer of destruction. People-pleasing doesn't just steal your past or your present, it steals your future. You never start the business. You never paint the painting. You never go on the trip. Because someone might disapprove. Because someone might not understand. And so your dreams don't die in one dramatic moment. They die in quiet hesitation, in polite deferrals, in endless maybe some other time. You start to notice that you don't feel alive anymore. You're functioning, smiling, being the person everyone expects. But inside, something feels numb. That numbness is the cost of self-abandonment. And the longer you ignore it, the more you normalize it. You start calling it being tired. You call it being busy. But deep down, you know, it's not exhaustion from doing too much. It's exhaustion from doing too little of what matters. Let me ask you something that might shake you. What if the version of you that everyone loves is actually your camouflage? What if the real you is buried beneath layers of performance? And what if that real you is more powerful, more creative, more magnetic than you've ever imagined, but you've never let them speak? Would you be willing to risk disapproval to meet that version of yourself? This is where the inner conflict intensifies. Because once you start awakening to your real desires, your real values, your real boundaries, and you realize how many people in your life were only there because you were pleasing them. And when you start showing up differently, some of them push back. They say, "You've changed." They say, "You're being selfish." But what they really mean is, you're no longer easy to control. And that's when you face the final test. Will you shrink back into your old role? Or will you stand in your truth, even if it means standing alone for a while? Standing alone is not a punishment. It's a rite of passage. It's the sacred space where you rebuild your inner architecture, where you learn to hear your own voice again, where you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That solitude can feel brutal, but it's also where power is born. Because once you stop needing everyone to like you, you become limitless. Your choices become yours again. Your time becomes sacred. Your yes becomes a sacred offering, not an obligation. And here's the spiritual truth. People-pleasing is not just a psychological problem, it's a soul problem. It's a disconnection from your own divinity. Because your soul was not made to be edited, diluted, or managed. It was made to express, to create, to radiate. And when you suppress that expression to keep others comfortable, you're not just betraying yourself, You're betraying the divine intelligence that made you. Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are." It sounds simple, but it's the most radical act of rebellion in a world built on conformity. Becoming who you are means shedding the scripts, the masks, the roles. It means risking rejection, ridicule, and misunderstanding. But it also means reclaiming joy, authenticity, and peace. And make no mistake, peace is not found in pleasing others. Peace is found in pleasing truth. So what do you do with all this? First, you recognize that people-pleasing is a habit, not a destiny. And like any habit, it can be changed. It takes awareness, courage, and practice. You start small. You check in with yourself before committing. You say, "Let me get back to you on that." You pause before the reflexive yes. You allow yourself to disappoint someone, and then you survive it. And every time you do, you become a little more free. And with that freedom comes clarity. You start to see which relationships are built on mutual respect and which are built on your compliance. You start to see where your energy goes and where it wants to go. You rediscover forgotten passions. You reclaim neglected dreams. And slowly, you begin to rebuild your life, not around others' expectations, but around your own essence. But let me warn you, this path is not for the faint of heart. It will challenge everything you've been taught. It will require you to reparent yourself, to soothe the younger version of you who learned that love must be earned through obedience. It will ask you to stand your ground when your voice shakes. But it will also reward you deeply. Because on the other side of people-pleasing is not just freedom. It's wholeness. You stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I like me?" You stop saying yes to be good and start saying yes because it feels right. You stop living your life as a reaction and start living as a creation. And that's when everything shifts. Your presence changes. Your energy changes. People feel it. Because you're no longer hiding. You're no longer performing. You're radiating truth. And truth, my friend, is magnetic. It's disruptive. It's healing. It's you. Now we arrive at the final descent, or perhaps the ascent, depending on how you choose to see it. Because once you've seen the cost of people-pleasing, once you've felt the weight of your own absence in your life, there's no going back. You can't unknow it. You can't return to pretending. You've stood on the edge and looked down into the abyss of self-abandonment. But what happens next is not a fall, it's a flight. If you have the courage to leap. Let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed. People-pleasing doesn't just affect your mind or heart, it corrupts your spirit. It drains your life force. It's not just about being too nice or too helpful. It's about becoming a servant to everyone else's moods, desires, and expectations. And when you do that long enough, you lose your vitality. You look in the mirror and see someone who's alive, technically, but not awake. You've become a background character in your own story. And it's easy to romanticize this martyrdom. Society rewards it. She's always there for everyone. He never complains. They're so easygoing. But what they don't see is the quiet suffering underneath, the resentment, the exhaustion, the internal scream for space. You were never meant to be everyone's emotional support system. You were meant to be a creator, a dreamer, a force. You were meant to take up space. So when you mold yourself into a shape that fits the room, you deny the shape you were born with. You deny your design. You might think, but if I stop pleasing people, they'll leave. I'll be alone. And yes, some will. But listen carefully to this. You will never lose the people who truly love you by being real. You will only lose those who were attached to the version of you that served them. And that's not loss, that's liberation. Because what you lose in shallow approval, you gain in deep alignment. You create space for real relationships built on truth, not transaction. Immanuel Kant said, "Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only." People-pleasing turns you into a means, a mechanism for others' comfort. It reduces you to a function. But you are not a function. You are not a utility. You are not here to lubricate other people's lives. You are here to exist, fully, powerfully, unapologetically. So how do we begin to dismantle this pattern? It starts with an act of radical honesty. You must admit to yourself, I have been living for others. Not to shame yourself, not to judge, but to wake up. Because the moment you name it, you disarm it. You take your power back. And from that place of awareness, you begin to rebuild. Not by pleasing, but by claiming. Claiming your time, your energy, your preferences, your no, your yes. This is not about becoming cold, cruel, or selfish. In fact, the opposite is true. When you stop people-pleasing, you become more loving, not less. Because now your love is not a transaction, it's a gift. It's given freely, not out of fear. You no longer say yes because you're afraid to say no. You say yes because you mean it. And that kind of love? That's the kind that transforms, not just others, but you. Let me ask you a confronting question. Who would you be if no one needed you to be anything? Strip away every role you've played. The fixer, the helper, the agreeable one, the one who always shows up. Who's left? And can you love that person, not for what they do, but for who they are? Most people never get to answer that question. They spend their entire lives in reaction mode, saying yes to keep the peace, staying small to avoid conflict, overgiving to feel valuable. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why they feel unseen. It's because they've never given the world a chance to know them. You can't be seen if you're always shape-shifting. You can't be loved if you're always performing. Aristotle spoke of the golden mean, the balance between deficiency and excess. People-pleasing is an excess of agreeableness to the point of self-erasure. The work is to return to the center, to strike the balance between compassion and self-respect, between generosity and boundaries, between love and truth. Because love without truth is slavery, and truth without love is cruelty. But when you bring love with truth, that's where freedom lives. And freedom is not a concept, it's a feeling. It's waking up without dread. It's walking into a room without calculating how to be liked. It's saying no and not explaining yourself. It's making decisions based on your values, not others' expectations. It's being able to sit with yourself and feel peace, not guilt. That's freedom, and it's available to you. But you must choose it, again and again. Because the pull to please doesn't vanish overnight. It's a muscle you've trained for years, maybe decades. So untraining it will feel like withdrawal. You'll feel guilt. You'll feel fear. That's normal. That's the detox. But if you stay the course, if you keep choosing truth over performance, something miraculous happens. Your life begins to reorganize itself around your essence. Not your ego, not your role, but your truth. And from that place, you start attracting different people, different opportunities. Because authenticity has a frequency. And when you vibrate with it, the fake falls away. The conditional love falls away. The one-sided friendships fall away. And what remains is real, solid, soulful. That's the reward. But you must first go through the fire of shedding who you're not. This is not just philosophy. It's an invitation to stop living your life as a reaction, to stop letting approval dictate your direction, to stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for your magic. You were not born to be liked. You were born to be real. And the world doesn't need more likable people. It needs more truth tellers, more boundary setters, more souls who are brave enough to say, "This is me, take it or leave it." So let's end where we began with you. Not the people pleaser, not the mask, but the you that existed before the world told you who to be. The you that remembers what it's like to laugh without permission, to say no without guilt, to choose yourself without apology. That version of you. They're not gone. They're just waiting for your permission to come back. And now, finally, you have the power to say yes. Not to them. Not to the roles. Not to the scripts. But to you. That's the moment you stop surviving and start living. And the world has never needed the real you more than it does right now.